We are a little more than 2 weeks out from Election Day, and with a record number of people expected to cast ballots, we are working to make sure your vote counts.
The people that we elect on a local level, on a state level, and on a national level impact our lives on a daily basis.
In the next 30 minutes, let's set politics aside and focus on the system in East Tennessee.
I'm confident that the state of Tennessee and Knoxville will get the ballots counted.
We are here to answer your questions and help make sure your voice is heard, no matter who you are voting for. Let's get started.
Straight from the heart of East Tennessee, this is 10 News at 5.
Right now, there are about 6.8 million people living in Tennessee. About 5.3 million of them are of legal age to vote, but only 4.4 million of those folks are registered to vote in the November election, and that number is going up as the state processes registration. So far, more than 720,000 Tennesseans have cast their ballots either through early voting or absentee. And Tennessee is seeing an increase in voting compared to the 2016 presidential election.
But historically, Tennessee is one of the worst states for voter turnout. It ranks in the bottom 10 in the country. In 2016, there were 4.9 million eligible voters in Tennessee. Only 4.1 million Tennesseans actually registered to vote. Only 2.5 million actually voted. That means there are 2.4 potential ballots that were never cast. You can change those statistics for this election by casting a ballot, and you have a few options to do that.
Let's run through them, Beth. First, vote in person on November 3rd. You could also avoid lines on Election Day by casting your ballot during early voting. That is already underway and runs through October 29th. If you can't go to the polls, you can also vote absentee. This year, you may qualify for an absentee ballot if you have underlying health conditions that put you at greater risk for COVID-19, or if you are over the age of 60. You can qualify if you're hospitalized, ill, or you will be outside the country during all of early voting and on Election Day. If you do qualify for an absentee ballot, you have to submit the request form to your county election office by October 27th. That is a week from tomorrow. Once your absentee ballot arrives, you have to fill it out and mail it in time to arrive by Election Day. The Postal Service recommends requesting your ballot sooner rather than later. The post office says voters should mail in their absentee ballots no later than October 27th.
Now, most people in Tennessee will likely vote in person. Reporter Grace King shows us how Democrats, Republicans, and election officials are all working to make sure your vote is counted at the polls.
Whether you ask the experts,
people should have faith in the electoral process.
The Democrats,
Our election volunteers have done a very good job of making the voting polling locations safe.
or the Republicans,
I'm confident that the state of Tennessee and Knoxville will get the ballots counted.
the message is the same.
We feel very secure in Knox County.
If your ballot is filled out properly, it'll be counted and kept safe.
Your ballot drops into a locked ballot box. It's sealed by a Democrat and Republican at the end of the night, and those are, after the election, they are kept in a room in this building locked up with an alarm code until after the certification of the election occurs.
We met with Knox County Elections Administrator Chris Davis to take a closer look at the process. If you make a mistake while voting in person,
We voted for two in this. You can only vote for one.
the machine will reject it in front of you.
See, it kicked it back. Your choices may not be properly marked. President, too many choices were marked. Contest will not be counted.
You can then fix your ballot and make sure it's approved.
Just takes it, feeds it. Boom. Your vote has been recorded. Thank you for voting.
The ballots collect on the bottom and everything's sealed with 2 locks.
Take it down to the warehouse with a Democrat and a Republican, sealing it up with a red and blue tab, putting it in a locked room, and it'll stay there until after the election.
I'm Grace King reporting.
And you have a lot of polling locations to choose from for early voting. This is a live look at the polling locations in East Tennessee. You can find these in this map on our website. If you're early voting, you can go to any early voting polling location in your county. To vote on Election Day, you must go to your assigned polling location. If you don't know where that is, you can find out online using the voter information lookup system on the Tennessee Secretary of State's website. We have a link at WBIR.com.
The first day of early voting did see long lines, but experts say those lines are expected to be even longer on Election Day, so they say you should vote early.
So it means that there's likely to be fewer people, shorter lines, which is both good for public health and safety purposes, but also good for just your time. We're all busy, and so if you can get in early vote and then it's done, and you don't have to worry about Election Day traffic or lines, or making sure that you know exactly your precinct location.
Election managers say early voting is especially important for first-time voters who may take longer to cast their ballot. Again, early voting lasts through October 29th. If you do vote in person, don't forget to bring a photo ID. That can be a driver's license, passport photo, military ID, or any other government-issued ID. You cannot use a school ID or an ID issued by your employer. You do not need to bring your voter registration card with you. Also, keep the campaigns out of the voting booths. Remember, you cannot wear any clothing with political logos or candidate names inside polling locations, and that does include masks. Across East Tennessee, different counties have different types of voting systems. Some are electronic, others are paper ballots. Right now online, we have a list of the voting system used in every East Tennessee county, plus instructions on how to use them. That is in the election section of WBIR.com. How you can tell if a photo is fake.
They say a photo is worth 1,000 words, but before you share, how do you know if that photo is real? Here's one way our reporters verify information online. It's called a reverse image search. Just upload the photo to a site like TinEye or Google Images. Those sites search for all the other times that photo has appeared online. You'll find out if it's an original or copy and pasted from a different date or from an entirely different story. If it shows up with tons of hits from different stories in the past, think twice before sharing. And remember, if you have any questions, you can always send them to our Verify team. So many of us find out about the news on Facebook, but none of us wants to share information that's not true. Here's one tool our reporters use to look into just who's behind those viral Facebook pages. Scroll down to the Page Transparency tab on all public Facebook pages. It'll tell you who owns it, when it was last renamed, and when it was created. Plus, you can see where the person who runs the page lives and whether they're paying for any ads. If something seems fishy about the Facebook page posting the headline that caught your eye, it might be a good idea to hold off before sharing with your friends. As always, if you have questions, you can send the post or the page to our Verify team.
Mail-in voting is a popular topic this election year, and the use of absentee ballots is expected to increase this year due in part to the pandemic. In the 2016 November election, more than 64,000 Tennesseans voted through absentee mail-in ballots. That's only about 2.5% of the total votes counted in the state.
With an expected uptick in absentee ballots, there is a big question out there that many of you have been asking us. Is voting by mail secure? Reporter David Schechter explains the facts.
Is voting by mail secure? Politicians, experts, and probably all of your neighbors are talking about mail-in voting and whether or not it's a safe and effective way to vote. Voting by mail began during the Civil War, when both Union and Confederate soldiers could cast ballots in their home states from their distant battlefields.
It's been sort of part and parcel of elections we've for a very long time, especially uniform and overseas voters. That allowed and opened the door for really a lot of expansions in regular voters moving to vote by mail.
Voting by mail has since come a long way, accounting for 25% of total votes in 2016. Currently, 5 states have mail-in voting for all elections. Opponents of mail-in voting point to double counting, or voting on behalf of deceased people. But a recent Washington Post study of 3 vote-by-mail states found just 372 possible cases where this happened. That's a fraction of the 14.6 million votes cast by mail in the 2016 and 2018 general elections. Fraud certainly is possible, but it's not nearly as widespread as some make it out to be.
There's this constant tension in election administration, right, between security and access. So the more accessible we make the system, the more opportunity there is for fraud. I don't think it is widespread. I don't think there is massive amounts of mail fraud going on. But to say there's no fraud in the system is also, disingenuous.
As far as the large-scale foreign attempts at vote-by-mail fraud, the FBI have recently stated that they have not seen a coordinated fraud effort and noted how difficult such an effort would be considering the decentralized nature of U.S. elections. However, Professor Atkinson does believe the rush to expand mail-in voting this year could make the system more vulnerable.
So this really shifts things in a way that's not typical. And so, we're going to expect later ballots. Look, we've seen that, many ballots in these places have gone uncounted. There's been delivery problems of ballots to the voter as well as back to the election official. So, in states that have this down, it's not a problem, but in states that aren't used to it, it's really a big change.
Even with those concerns, Professor Atkinson believes mail-in voting is a good option this year due to COVID-19.
The circumstances are such that, we should all vote by mail as much as possible. I mean, the system is very strong, really. Election officials, work to make sure there's integrity to the system. We have to look at this as a single moment where we have to bend our system because of the circumstances, and then we need to go back and let states evolve naturally into processes that make sense for their voters.
And this year, you can track your absentee ballot online. Once you mail your ballot in, just head to the Secretary of State's website and look for the ballot status tracker. You can also find a link on WBIR.com. This is what the tracker looks like. You will have to enter some personal information, and then you can watch to see your absentee ballot, if it's received, counted by your county election commission. Now, very few absentee ballots are rejected, but there are some things voters can do to make sure their ballot is counted. Grace King explains.
The biggest tip from election officials is don't wait.
United States Postal Service says they like to tell people give it 7 days.
Your ballot has to be received by the close of polls on Election Day, but before you mail it back, here's a few things to check. First, the signature. They're looking to make sure it matches what's on file. Then, how you fill out the boxes.
There may be a pin dot in here somewhere. There may be, somebody may have colored this box out and then marked through the name and said, "No, I mean this," and literally point an arrow down here.
That could cause your ballot to be kicked back by the scanner. But there's a team of Democrats and Republicans working together to make sure your ballot will count anyway. I'm Grace King reporting.
And as we count down to Election Day, we are working to answer your questions about the voting process. One viewer asked, if I do not receive my absentee ballot in time, can I still go vote at one of the on-site election polling locations? The answer is yes. Election leaders say if you don't submit your absentee ballot, you can go vote in person. You will fill out a provisional ballot.
Another viewer asked, will counties have official ballot drop boxes if you prefer not to mail your ballot? The answer is no. According to the Tennessee Secretary of State, all absentee ballots must be returned by mail.
A different viewer asked, does the application for a mail-in ballot require you to tell your voting party preference? Does the ballot envelope have an R or a D in the barcode? The answer is no. According to the Tennessee Secretary of State, for the general election, you do not have to disclose your political party preference on your absentee application, and there is nothing on the outside of the absentee ballot envelope indicating which party you voted for.
If you have a question about voting or the election, let us know. Text it to us, 865-637-1010. We will do our best to answer them all on air and online leading up to Election Day. You can also find a list of questions and their answers right now on WBIR.com.
Politicians have been known to tweet things they later regret and delete. But sometimes people post fake screenshots of supposedly deleted tweets. Often our reporters check this out by calling the politician. But sometimes we use this site called PolitiWhoops from nonprofit newsroom ProPublica. It lets you search deleted tweets from politicians at all levels of government. Like this one, the president deleted, probably because it has a typo. This way, you don't have to rely on screenshots shared online because those can be photoshopped. And if you have questions about whether a tweet is real, you can always send it to our Verify team. We'll look into it for you. Our reporters verify the information we tell you to make sure that it's accurate. But there are some sites out there pretending to be news sites and pushing out false information. Here's one example of what to look for. This tweet, apparently from the BBC, says the British Prime Minister has died. Of course, he has not, and the tweet is not actually from the BBC. You can tell because the Twitter handle is incomplete. There's no blue check mark saying Twitter has verified the account, and the same is true for Facebook. Look at the link. Do you recognize the news site? If not, maybe do more research. You don't want to be the one who shares something that isn't true. And remember, if you're still not sure, you can always send it to our Verify team, and we'll check it out for you.
So this election, and we hear it all the time, most important in our lifetime.
As we count down to Election Day, make a plan to cast your vote, because no matter who you vote for, this election impacts you, your family, and our community.
We have seen that elections have consequences, better or for worse.
Whether you're casting your ballot early or by mail or on Election Day, your vote matters.
People have a say. The vote is a part of that process of people having a say in government.
Make sure you mark your calendar and make sure your vote counts.
If you don't get it done by November 3rd, then you're not going to get counted.
And you can find everything you need to know about voting and the election right now on WBIR.com. You can text the word election to 865-637-1010, and we will send that information to you.